how many members of Congress and how many members of the President Trump's cabinet have used their privileged position and information for personal profit. Do any of you know? Between 2019 and 2021, the New York Times found that 97 members, or 18% of Congress, traded stocks in sectors related to their committee work. That Attorney General Pam Bondi, the person who leads the Department of Justice and is supposed to prosecute criminals and uphold our Constitution, sold up to $5.5 million in Trump media stock on the exact same day the president announced tariffs that sent that stock plummeting 13%. As head of the Department of Justice and a close friend of President Trump, she had access to information that working families in my district could never dream of having. On February 11th, 2 days before President Trump announced his tariff plans that sent markets plummeting.
Hi, friends. John back again missed these sessions. Pam Bondi admitted everything, faces life in prison, or pleaded guilty or false. No such developments have occurred. The dramatic narrative is completely unsubstantiated. Always verify before reacting. Bondi hasn't admitted anything, been charged, convicted, or faced any judicial ruling, let alone life in prison. What actually exists are unproven allegations about stock trades, not criminal charges. Sensational headlines are distorting reality. Always verify before believing. What actually happened? Allegations that Bondi sold $5.5 million in Trump media shares before tariff announcements, claims of possible insider trading. But these are only allegations, not proven facts. No charges filed, no court case opened, no conviction.
Secretary Duffy sold up to $600,000 worth of stock across 34 companies. On that day of the announcement, he sold another $50,000. On that day, he tweeted that these tariffs are the culmination of his work on tariff policies. His work on tariff policies.
The gentlewoman from California, Ms. Torres, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, for organizing this meeting, and thank you to our guests for being here today. I am greatly concerned and would like to know how many members of Congress and how many members of the President Trump's cabinet have used their privileged position and information for personal profit. Do any of you know? The last report, between 2019 and 2021, the New York Times found that
the viral headlines are wildly misleading. Let me explain in detail what the allegations against Bondi actually are and what is really happening with her legal situation. This matters because understanding the difference between allegations and actual charges is how you avoid being misled by sensational headlines. First, let me explain what the Trump media stock allegations are about. Pam Bondi is Trump's Attorney General. Before becoming Attorney General, Bondi was involved in various political and business activities. At some point, Bondi apparently bought Trump media shares. Trump Media is the company behind Trump's social media platform, Truth Social. Then Trump announced plans for reciprocal tariffs. Tariffs are taxes on imported goods.
97 members, or 18% of Congress, traded stocks in sectors related to their committee work. In the 117th Congress, 78 violated the Stock Act by failing to disclose in a timely manner. We don't know exactly how many people in the administration have these types of conflict. You know, my constituents sent me to Washington to address their immediate needs. The rising cost of out-of-pocket costs that are making their lives extremely difficult, and to ensure that their government is working for them. They certainly didn't send me to enrich myself, and as one of the poorest members in Congress, I can say that with my head up, former 911 dispatcher. Members of Congress, the Trump administration and their relatives should not have a blank check to use privileged information to cash in while working families continue to struggle.
Reciprocal tariffs mean Trump would tax goods from countries that tax American goods. Trump's tariff announcement could affect various businesses, including media companies. The claim is that Trump media stock might have been affected by this tariff announcement. The allegation is that Bondi sold her Trump media shares shortly before Trump announced the tariffs. The claim is that Bondi had inside information about the tariff announcement and used that information to sell her shares before the stock price could fall. The claim is that this is insider trading, using non-public information to trade stocks. But here's the critical point that so many people are missing.
I'm particularly concerned about public reports that Attorney General Pam Bondi, the person who leads the Department of Justice and is supposed to prosecute criminals and uphold our Constitution, sold up to $5.5 million in Trump media stock on the exact same day the president announced tariffs that sent that stock plummeting 13%. As head of the Department of Justice and a close friend of President Trump, she had access to information that working families in my district could never dream of having. And while she was gaming the stock market with special knowledge, families across the country were continuing to struggle with rising costs. And here we have our top law enforcement officer potentially using insider information to protect her personal wealth while regular Americans continue to be left behind. On February 11th, 2 days before President Trump announced his tariff plans that sent markets plummeting.
These are allegations made by journalists and political strategists. These are not court findings. These are not criminal charges. These are not proven facts. Someone looked at the timing of Bondi's stock sales and the tariff announcement and raised questions about whether this was insider trading. But no prosecutor has opened a case. No charges have been filed. There is simply no legal proceeding happening here. Let me talk about what insider trading actually is and how it is prosecuted, because understanding the legal process is essential to understanding why this headline is so misleading. Insider trading is using non-public material information to trade securities.
Secretary Duffy sold up to $600,000 worth of stock across 34 companies. On that day of the announcement, he sold another $50,000. Secretary Duffy tweeted, and this is specifically disgusting to me. On that day, he tweeted that these tariffs are the culmination of his work on tariff policies, having worked directly with Trump's trade advisor, Peter Navarro, on reciprocal tariff legislation. This episode exposes a dangerous loophole. Senior executive branch officials can legally trade individual stocks even when they have access to sensitive market-moving policy information or lead the policies themselves. I'm left wondering what specific legislation reforms ensure that senior officials who shape policies that move markets cannot use technicalities to profit from their privileged access to information. Because right now, the message that we are sending hard-working taxpayers across America is that government service comes with a stock market advantage for those in power, but the market crashes for those paying taxes.
It is illegal. Securities fraud investigators can investigate suspicious trading patterns. If investigators find evidence of insider trading, prosecutors can charge someone with the crime. But charging someone requires evidence. Prosecutors have to prove that someone had access to non-public information. Prosecutors have to prove that someone used that information to trade stocks. This requires investigation and evidence gathering. You cannot just charge someone because the timing looks suspicious. In Bondi's case, no investigation has been publicly opened, no charges have been filed, no evidence has been presented in court, there is nothing beyond allegations and speculation about the timing of her stock sales. Now, let me explain what the headline is really doing, because this is where the manipulation becomes clear. The headline says, Bondi admits everything and a judge clears a path to life prison. This makes it sound like there has been a court case where Bondi confessed and a judge ruled. But none of this happened. The headline is actually conflating three completely separate stories. First, allegations about Bondi's stock trades. Second, a criminal case against Luigi Mangione involving federal stalking charges. Third, a separate case against Ismael El Mayo Zambada, a Sinaloa cartel figure. Luigi Mangione is facing potential life imprisonment for federal stalking charges. This is a real criminal case against Mangione. Mangione pled guilty to federal stalking charges. Mangione is facing sentencing and could receive a life sentence. But this has nothing to do with Bondi. Ismael El Mayo Zambada is a major narcotics trafficker. Zambada was given a life sentence after pleading guilty. But again, this has nothing to do with Bondi. Bondi's name appears in some reporting only because the Justice Department did not seek the death penalty against Zambada. But Bondi is not the one facing imprisonment. So the headline takes allegations about Bondi's stock trades and mixes them with criminal cases against completely different people. The headline makes it sound like Bondi admitted to crimes and faces life imprisonment, but that is a false conflation of three separate stories. Now, let me talk about why this is so misleading and honestly dangerous. If Bondi had actually been charged with a crime and confessed, that would be huge news. That would be reported by every major news outlet. That would be documented in court filings. That would be public record. But none of this exists. Instead, what exists is allegations about stock trades and allegations of insider trading. These are serious allegations, if true, but they are not the same as criminal charges. They are not the same as convictions. They are not the same as admissions of guilt. The headline takes allegations and presents them as if they are admissions and convictions. The headline takes separate criminal cases against other people and presents them as if they involve Bondi. The headline combines all of this into a false story about Bondi going to prison. Let me break down exactly what is true and what is false. First, what is true? Bondi did sell Trump media shares. The timing of the sales relative to the tariff announcement is a fact. Some people have raised questions about the timing. These are all true facts. Second, what is false? There are no criminal charges against Bondi. There is no criminal investigation that has been publicly opened. There is no guilty plea from Bondi. There is no court ruling against Bondi. There is no judge who has ruled anything about Bondi going to prison. None of these things are true. Third, what actually matters right now? Bondi has been nominated as Attorney General and is currently serving in that role. Bondi faces no criminal charges related to her stock trades. If prosecutors decide to investigate her stock trades, that investigation would be separate from her role as Attorney General. But no such investigation has been publicly announced. The real political question that people should be asking: if there were evidence of insider trading, what should happen? Should Bondi be investigated? Should charges be filed? Should she resign as Attorney General? These are legitimate political and legal questions, but they are completely different from claiming Bondi has already admitted guilt and faces prison. So the accurate story is that Bondi made stock trades that some people think deserve investigation. But there is no evidence of wrongdoing. There are no charges. There is no case. There is just speculation about the timing of trades. This is very different from what the headline suggests. The headline makes it sound like Bondi is going to prison. The reality is that Bondi faces no charges and no legal action. Now let me explain why this headline is so dangerous and why it matters that we get this right. When media outlets make false claims about legal proceedings, they mislead people about what is actually happening. They make people think major events occurred when nothing actually happened. They create false urgency and false impressions of what is really going on. People read a headline saying, Bondi admits everything and faces life prison. And they think this is true. They think Bondi confessed to crimes. They think a judge ruled against her. They think she is going to prison. They believe these things and act on them. They form political opinions based on false information. They share these false claims with their friends and family. They get angry and outraged about something that literally hasn't happened. But the truth is that allegations exist, and that is all. There are no charges. There is no court case. There is no confession. There is no judge's ruling. There is just allegations and speculation about stock trades. Understanding the difference between allegations and actual legal proceedings is how you stay informed. Allegations are important. If there are serious allegations, they deserve investigation. But allegations are not the same as charges. Charges are not the same as convictions. Convictions are not the same as sentencing. When you read a headline about someone facing legal trouble, ask yourself, what is the actual legal status? Has someone been charged? Has someone been convicted? Has a judge ruled? If the answer to these questions is no, then the headline is probably exaggerating what is actually happening. In Bondi's case, the answer to all these questions is no. No charges, no conviction, no judge ruling. But the headline makes it sound like all of these things happen. The headline is false. Now let me talk about why allegations matter even when they are not proven. Allegations of insider trading are serious. If Bondi traded stocks using non-public information, that would be illegal and wrong. Allegations deserve investigation. Allegations deserve scrutiny. But investigation is different from conviction. Scrutiny is different from proof. An allegation is just a claim. For the allegation to become legal reality, prosecutors have to charge someone and prove the charge beyond a reasonable doubt in court. Right now, we are at the allegation stage. We are not at the investigation stage. We are certainly not at the conviction stage. The headline pretends we are at the conviction and sentencing stage, but we are only at the allegation stage. So while it is fair to ask whether Bondi should be investigated for insider trading, it is not fair to claim she has confessed and faces prison. That is false. That is misleading. That goes way beyond what the facts support. Now let me also talk about the Luigi Mangione and Elmaio Zambada cases, because the headline mixes these into the Bondi story. Mangione is a separate defendant facing his own charges. Zambada is a separate defendant who already received a life sentence. Neither of these cases has anything to do with Bondi. The headline mentions these cases to create confusion. The headline makes it sound like all three people are involved in some major legal crisis, but they are not. Mangione and Zambada are involved in their own separate cases. Bondi is not involved in their cases. This is a manipulation technique. Headlines mix unrelated stories to create a false impression that something bigger is happening. Headlines use confusion to get attention. Headlines know that people will see the words life prison and Bondi and assume Bondi faces prison, even though the cases mentioned are not about Bondi. Recognizing this manipulation technique helps you evaluate headlines accurately. When a headline mentions multiple people in multiple legal situations, look carefully. Make sure the people are actually involved in the same case. Make sure the legal situations are actually related. If they are not, then the headline is being misleading. In this case, Mangione and Zambada are completely unrelated to Bondi. The headline is using their cases to create false impressions about Bondi's situation. This is manipulation through confusion. And yeah, this is exactly why media literacy is so important. Understanding that allegations are not convictions. Understanding that multiple cases are different cases. Understanding that headlines can mix unrelated stories to create false impressions. This understanding protects you from being misled. So when you see a headline about Bondi facing prison, recognize that there are no charges and no legal proceedings against her. Recognize that allegations exist, but allegations are not the same as legal action. Recognize that other people facing life sentences have nothing to do with Bondi. Recognize that the headline is false and misleading. The accurate story is that Bondi made stock trades that some people think deserve investigation. That is the entire story. Anything beyond that is speculation or false claims. Let me provide more detail about Trump Media and why Bondi might have been invested in it. Trump Media is the company that operates Truth Social, Trump's social media platform. Trump Media has been a controversial investment because it has struggled financially. But Trump supporters and Trump associates have invested in Trump Media anyway as a show of support or a speculation that the company could become valuable. Pam Bondi is a loyal Trump supporter. Bondi has been involved in Trump's legal defense multiple times. Bondi has taken public positions supporting Trump, so it makes sense that Bondi might have invested in Trump Media. It makes sense that Bondi might own Trump Media shares. This is not inherently suspicious. Many Trump supporters own Trump Media shares. What raises questions is the timing of when Bondi sold her shares relative to the tariff announcement. If Bondi sold before the announcement, she might have avoided losses. If the tariff announcement affected the stock price and Bondi sold before the announcement, then Bondi might have benefited from advanced knowledge. But here's the issue. Knowing that tariffs might be announced is different from having inside information about when they will be announced. Many people might predict that Trump will announce tariffs, but knowing the specific timing of the announcement is inside information. The question is whether Bondi had advanced knowledge of the tariff announcement timing. If she did, and if she used that knowledge to trade stocks, that would be insider trading. But we do not know whether she had advanced knowledge. We only know the timing of her stock sales looks suspicious to some observers. Now let me explain more about how insider trading investigations actually work, because this is crucial to understanding why the headline is so misleading. The Securities and Exchange Commission investigates suspicious trading patterns. The SEC looks at who traded, what they traded, when they traded, and what public information was available at the time. If the SEC finds evidence that someone traded on non-public information, the SEC can refer the case to prosecutors. Prosecutors can then decide whether to charge someone with insider trading. Prosecutors need evidence. Prosecutors need to prove that someone had access to non-public information. Prosecutors need to prove that someone used that information to trade. Prosecutors need to prove this beyond a reasonable doubt in court. Only after going through this whole process, investigation, evidence gathering, charging, trial, can someone be convicted of insider trading. Only after conviction can a judge impose a sentence. You cannot just charge someone because trades look suspicious. You need evidence. In Bondi's case, we do not even know if an investigation has been opened. No prosecutor has publicly stated that an investigation is underway. No SEC investigation has been publicly announced. There are just allegations about the timing of trades. Now let me explain what evidence prosecutors would need to prove insider trading against Bondi. First, prosecutors would need to prove that Bondi had access to non-public information about the tariff announcement. This would require proving that someone told her about the tariffs before they were announced publicly. This would require witness testimony or communication showing advanced knowledge. Second, prosecutors would need to prove that Bondi used this information to make her stock trades. This would require showing that Bondi sold her shares specifically to avoid losses that would occur after the announcement. This would require showing that Bondi's actions were motivated by the advanced information. Third, prosecutors would need to prove that the information was material, meaning it was likely to affect stock prices. This would require showing that knowledge of tariffs would make a reasonable investor want to sell Trump Media shares. All of this requires evidence. All of this requires investigation. None of this has happened based on publicly available information. So we are nowhere near a conviction or sentencing. Now, let me talk about what would have to happen for the headline to be true. For the headline to be accurate, all of the following would have to occur. First, prosecutors would have to charge Bondi with insider trading. Second, Bondi would have to admit guilt or be convicted at trial. Third, a judge would have to sentence Bondi to prison. None of these things have happened. No charges have been filed. Bondi has not admitted guilt. No judge has sentenced anyone. So the headline is completely false. But the headline makes it sound like all of these things have happened. The headline makes it sound like this is all decided, and Bondi is definitely going to prison. But none of it is decided. In fact, none of it has even started in terms of formal legal proceedings. Now let me talk about Pam Bondi's role as Attorney General, because this context is important. Bondi was nominated by Trump to be Attorney General. Bondi was confirmed by the Senate and is now serving as Attorney General. This is a major position in Trump's administration. Bondi is responsible for leading the Justice Department. If there were evidence of insider trading against Bondi, this would raise serious questions about her fitness to serve as Attorney General. This would raise conflict of interest questions. This would raise questions about whether Bondi should recuse herself from matters related to the investigation. These are legitimate political and ethical questions, but they are different from claiming Bondi has already admitted guilt and faces prison. The political and ethical questions arise from allegations. They do not require conviction, but they do require some action, either investigation or recusal, or both. Right now, there is no public evidence of formal investigation. There is no indication that Bondi has recused herself from matters related to insider trading. There is just allegations and speculation. So the question facing lawmakers and the public is whether Bondi's stock trades deserve investigation by law enforcement, and whether Bondi should recuse herself while questions are pending. These are fair questions to raise, but they are different from claiming Bondi is going to prison. Now let me explain more about how the headline mixes separate cases. The headline mentions Luigi Mangione and his potential life sentence. Mangione is accused of stalking. Mangione pled guilty to federal stalking charges. A judge will sentence Mangione and could impose a life sentence. But this is Mangione's case. This has nothing to do with Bondi. Mangione's case will be decided based on the evidence and the law of stalking and federal crimes. Bondi is not involved in this case. Bondi is not being sentenced. The fact that someone else faces a life sentence does not mean Bondi faces any sentence. Similarly, the headline mentions El Mayo Zambada, a cartel leader who was given a life sentence. Again, this is Zambada's case. This has nothing to do with Bondi. Zambada faced charges for narcotics trafficking and money laundering. Zambada was convicted. Zambada was sentenced to life. But Bondi is not involved in this case either. The headline uses Mangione and Zambada's cases to create the impression that Bondi is involved in some major legal crisis, but she is not. Their cases are completely separate. Now let me talk about media manipulation tactics and how this headline demonstrates them. The headline uses several manipulation techniques. First, conflation of separate stories. The headline mixes allegations about Bondi with criminal cases against completely different people. Second, false causation. The headline makes it sound like the criminal cases against others somehow affect Bondi's legal situation, but they do not. Third, emotional language. The headline uses words like admits everything and prison to trigger emotional responses, but these words are not accurate descriptions of what is happening. Fourth, false urgency. The headline makes it sound like something major just happened, but nothing major has happened. There are just allegations and speculation. These manipulation tactics are designed to get attention. They are designed to get shares and clicks. They are not designed to inform accurately. When you see a headline using these tactics, you should be skeptical. You should ask whether the headline is accurately describing what is happening. You should look for credible reporting that provides specific details and evidence. You should not just accept sensational claims at face value. In this case, the accurate story is much less dramatic than the headline suggests. The accurate story is that Bondi sold some stock. Some people think the timing looks suspicious. No investigation has been publicly opened. No charges have been filed. This is the accurate story. And yeah, this is how you protect yourself from misinformation. You recognize manipulation tactics. You look for specific details and evidence. You reject claims that lack these details. You base your opinions on accurate information, not on sensational false headlines. Now, let me talk about what responsible reporting on this issue would actually look like, because this matters for how we consume news going forward. Responsible reporting would clearly distinguish between allegations and proven facts. It would explain what the allegations are and who made them. It would explain what legal proceedings exist and what stage they are at. It would explain what evidence exists and what evidence is still needed. It would not conflate separate cases or imply connections that don't exist. It would not use emotional language to create false impressions. It would not create false urgency where none exists. Responsible reporting would tell you that allegations exist and that those allegations deserve scrutiny, but it would also tell you that no charges have been filed and no legal proceedings have begun. That is the accurate picture. That is what an honest headline would look like. But that kind of responsible reporting doesn't generate as many clicks as sensational false headlines. And that's the problem we're all facing. The incentives in today's media landscape reward exaggeration and sensationalism. They reward false urgency and emotional manipulation. They reward conflating separate stories into dramatic false narratives. And they punish accuracy and nuance because accuracy and nuance don't generate the same level of engagement. This is a real problem for anyone who wants to actually understand what's happening in the world. But you can protect yourself from this manipulation. You can learn to recognize the tactics being used. You can learn to ask the right questions. You can learn to distinguish between allegations and proven facts. You can learn to look for specific details and evidence. You can learn to reject claims that lack these details. And that's what I'm trying to help you do here. So let me leave you with this. The headline about Bondi admitting everything and facing life prison is completely false. Bondi has not admitted anything. Bondi faces no charges. Bondi faces no legal proceedings. Allegations exist about stock trades, but allegations are not convictions. Other people are facing life sentences, but those cases have nothing to do with Bondi. The accurate story is that Bondi sold some stock, and some people think the timing looks suspicious. That is the entire story. Anything beyond that is speculation or false claims. Don't let sensational headlines mislead you. Don't let emotional language manipulate you. Don't let false urgency rush you into forming opinions based on false information. Stay skeptical, ask questions, look for evidence, base your opinions on accurate information. That's how you protect yourself from misinformation. That's how you stay informed about what's actually happening in the world. And honestly, this is going to keep happening. There will be more sensational false headlines about more people and more situations. The pattern will repeat itself because it works. It generates engagement, it generates shares, it generates clicks. But now you know how to spot it. Now you know what questions to ask. Now you know how to distinguish between what's real and what's manufactured. And that knowledge is power. Use it. Share it with others. Help them avoid being misled too. Because the more people who can recognize these manipulation tactics, the less effective they become. And that's a good thing for all of us. Stay sharp, stay skeptical, and don't let false headlines control what you believe about the world.